What's up, everybody? Welcome to the 3 and Out YouTube page. I'm John Middlekauff, and we are talking football all day, every day. Make sure you subscribe, like the video, share it with your friends. Let's roll, baby. Okay, let's do a little Middlekauff mailbag. We're going to do a big one later this week, so probably do 3 or 4 questions here. The way you get in the mailbag is very easy. At John Middlekauff, my Instagram, fire in those DMs, get your question answered on the show. Tristan, my question is once again about the Falcons draft debacle. Apparently, the Bears were willing to trade a 4th rounder to move up and secure Rome Odunze. The Falcons refused. If you know you have a tampering case going on and a draft pick is most likely going to be taken away from the team trying to trade with you, literally just drafted their quarterback at number 1, why on earth would you not move back 1 spot to pick up compensation and still be able to get the player you wanted? If you were that locked in on Penix to begin with, who is the 2nd oldest quarterback ever to be drafted in the 1st round? Once again, why pay a 35-year-old coming off an Achilles? Does the Falcons front office ever have a fucking clue what's going on? Seems like every year they make the most puzzling moves. And as a Bucs fan, I'm all for it, but their strategy year in and year out is puzzling. I don't understand how you fall in love with a player the last month when your job as a front office is literally to monitor these guys year round. And the answer is simply the coaches in Atlanta, because coaches get involved after the combine and after free agency. They got more involved. And so it's pretty clear that the GM ain't the guy driving the bus. The head coach and the offensive coordinator, to me, had their hands all over this. I also think this, when it comes to a draft day trade, it never does not make sense to trade back 1 spot and get a free draft pick when you know you're going to get the player. I think who the Jets trade with, Minnesota. And in the video that they put out inside their draft room, Saleh looks at Joe Douglas and he's just like, free money? Because that's what it is. We would have taken this guy at pick 8. Now we just take him at pick 9. We pay him a little less because contracts are slotted. And we just get a free 4th, 5th, 3rd, whatever the pick is. It's a no-brainer. Now, if you were trading, the Raiders or Minnesota or Denver wanted that pick, and you're dead set on taking the quarterback, then yeah, totally understand turning it down because you think, well, they might take the player. But like you said, when the Bears call you, you know unequivocally they are not going to take Michael Penix. Even if they go, hey, we can't tell you who we're going to take, fine. You can check the quarterback position off that box. So I've said what I've said about it. Still can't quite get over it. Kind of sucks for Penix, but if you were going to select a head coach for your franchise, would you prefer to go the route of hiring a coordinator from a good team, or would you rather hire a college head coach? It seems like most of the college head coaches have been failing recently, and the coordinators seem to be doing better, but that's just my opinion. I think the key to the NFL when you're hiring a head coach, it is in the modern day game, in 2024, it is very risky to hire a guy with 0 NFL experience. Urban Meyer, it's undisputed, or it's undisputable, how awesome of a college coach he is. I think he's always been kind of a D-bag and kind of a fraud, but when he's your head coach, he is going to kick some serious ass. What happened in Jacksonville was an all-time embarrassment. I mean, it really was. Urban Meyer never worked in the NFL, ever. He had not spent 1 day in the NFL. So, like, when people would sniff around on Nick Saban, Nick Saban worked for Belichick for years as a defensive coordinator. Now, obviously, it's a lot different in 1992 and 1993 than it is in 2018 or whenever these teams probably were interested. But still, he had been around and coached pro players and worked for Belichick. So you go, listen, this guy has been in a pro building. right? I think Lincoln Riley was a guy that a lot of people had been interested in, a lot like Chip Kelly. It's like, guys, he has no NFL experience, none. So when you make moves like that, it's pretty risky. Then you get some of these hybrid guys, like Bill O'Brien's been back and forth. He's a guy that's coached in college, coached in the pros. So you know that he understands both games. And I'm not talking about calling a play or designing a scheme for an offense or a defense. I'm talking about on a daily basis dealing with finding players, cutting players, just handling situations in the NFL that are just different than college. You don't deal with a provost or a booster or a president or an AD or the softball coach or any of that bullshit. You deal with two people, really, the owner and the GM, and then your team. So, Kirby Smart. I don't have his resume up, but I think he worked for Nick Saban for a couple years in Miami. He's seen the pro game, but would he be a good NFL coach? I don't know. I don't know. I think it'd be pretty risky. Is he an excellent college coach? 100%. He's elite. Dan Hurley is a good example. Dan Hurley was coaching high school like 10 years ago. Would he have worked in the pros? I don't know. He is an elite college coach. I mean, he's the best in the business. Back-to-back national championships. Would it have gone well with the Lakers? I don't know. You've seen it before with college coaches. It doesn't really work out in the NBA. Because now the NBA and the NFL dynamics are a little bit different, but still, you're dealing with a lot more people that make a lot more money than you. So I would just be very hesitant. When you look around college, think who the best coaches are. Obviously Kirby, Nick's now retired, Lane Kiffin, Harbaugh is a good example. He was a hybrid. He had coached both and he had played. So he played in the NFL for 15 years. And then his career started with the Raiders and Al Davis. So when he got back to the 49ers, yeah, he had been coached in college with San Diego and Stanford for a while, but he had played in the league for 15 years. And his brother was an NFL coach. So he was pretty dialed into the league. And it's why he goes back to Michigan. Now he comes back to the Chargers he's going to be successful. Now, it also goes both ways. Could Andy Reid or Mike Tomlin or one of those guys handle college? I don't know. They would have to deal with a lot of stuff they're not used to dealing with. 80s, conferences. I don't know. It's probably a pain in the ass. I just like when someone knows what they're doing. Matt Rule, think about him. Matt Rule had a ton of success in college. At Baylor, at Temple. And then David Tepper gave him all this money. He had coached for one season in the pros as the assistant offensive line coach for the Giants. That's pretty risky. If a guy has a resume of several years in the pros, position coach, coordinator, I would feel better about hiring a college coach. But if a guy either has zero experience or 1 year, I mean, Chip Kelly got eaten up and spitting out in the pros after a couple years. Couldn't deal with people. Couldn't deal with players. That's a huge part of being successful in the NFL. Do your players respect you and like you? Think about the way these guys talk about Andy Reid, Mike Tomlin, Kyle and McVay. All the guys in Green Bay clearly love LaFleur. I mean, hell, Aaron Rodgers loved LaFleur. I think college coaches, it's hard. It's just a different human dynamic. When you're dealing with a 19-year-old and you're dealing with a 32-year-old with two kids and $70 million in the bank and as serious as you. I remember, in LaShawn and Deshaun talked about this, but the Niners did the same thing. You can't ask Joe Staley to have a shake every night. He doesn't want a protein shake. He does it his own way. He's been in the league a decade. Let him figure it out. You can't tell Jason Peters what to eat. He's a grown man. He'll figure it out. Now, Kirby Smart and guys like that might not be doing that, but I think it's just a slippery slope of just dealing with a different wiring of human. Now, rookies in the pros, you'd have a pretty good feel for those guys, but it's a lot different than deal with Cam Hayward or Trent Williams. Trent Williams doesn't want to work out today. Are you going to get really mad at him? Try to find him? Make him run or something? Or just yeah, he's 35-year-old Hall of Famer. You do what you do, Trent. We're good. See you on Sundays. Mailbag question. Which trade is the bigger heist in your opinion? Watson to the Browns or Wilson to the Broncos? Houston in return for Watson got Pierce, Anderson, Kenyon Green, Tank Dell, and a corner in this year's draft. Broncos in return got Cross, Witherspoon, Fant, Locke, and a few more. Recently started my full-time job working at a plumbing company. Podcast makes the day go by quicker. Congrats. I actually got a couple plumbing issues right now. One of my bathroom sinks smelling a little weird. I would say you have to factor in more than just the draft picks. Because ultimately, Houston, by trading him, bottomed out and sucked. And that essentially led to CJ Stroud. And that changed their franchise. So you have to factor in getting rid of the guy. Do you bottom out and suck? Which Houston was trying to do. Seattle was trying to kind of maintain and sustain it. But 2 years later, Pete Carroll got fired. Now, both of them are big wins. Watson, the massage therapist, the drama, just get out of here. Russell, the prima donna, not listening to anybody, thinking you're more important than the operation. Both of them had to, clearly looking back, made the right decision. But in 2024, who's in the better spot? Not really debatable. It's Houston because they have CJ Stroud. Now, Seattle won. They got rid of Russell. They got a bunch of really good players, tackle, DB, cap space, but they still don't have their quarterback. So I would say Houston because indirectly that trade did lead to CJ Stroud. Now, you had to go through a couple coaching debacles to get there, but you got there. What does Bryson's win do for Liv? Nothing. I'm not a Liv hater, but I don't consume it, and neither does anybody. I don't think anyone is more likely to turn on the CW and watch guys play 54 holes. Part of what makes Bryson special, you saw at the PGA and you saw at the US Open, is competing over the weekend in a 4-round tournament. Like, Liv doesn't have that. They will never have that. And maybe by the time you're listening to this, there's supposed to be an agreement. Who knows? The merge getting back together. But I don't think his does nothing. Like, I don't think anyone is more inclined to watch Liv now. I mean, they've had him the whole time. I mean, he has been a big draw for them, and no one watches. We are not going to consume that. Why? Because it doesn't, kind of boring. And it doesn't matter. There's nothing on the line besides money. And part of the reason we watch sports is like, can Celtics finally win the NBA Finals? Is there any chance the Oilers can come storming back and McDavid win the Stanley Cup? Because we know how important those moments are. Like, we know what a big deal it is to win the US Open. It's like, why did we get so into, I'm not the biggest tennis guy, but Federer, Nadal, Djokovic, obviously when I was a kid, Agassi, Sampras, because you knew what was on the line with the Grand Slams. I guess a documentary's coming out about Lance Armstrong, who, listen, I used to wear the yellow bracelet. I've seen enough documentaries. I mean, the way he treated people, I think, like, you don't just go from piece of shit to like, now I'm rehabilitated. But the reason he became such a big deal, because everyone knows you win the Tour de France, like, kind of matters. Turns out he was juiced up like he was Barry Bonds or something, but there has to be history to the events we're watching. They have to mean something. You can't just start something from scratch, especially in 2024, and expect anyone to care. That's why I think the in-season tournament is so stupid. Like, Adam, and I understand you're doing it for television purposes, and I get it. It's a business move. But you can't pretend that any of us care, that any of us think it's a big deal, because it's literally not. It will never be a big deal. Maybe in 100 years when we're all dead and gone, but right now this does not matter. We all know it. And that's the thing with Liv. None of their tournaments matter at all. They don't mean anything. And listen, some PGA Tour tournaments don't mean anything either, but a lot of them do. Like, winning a tournament where Tiger Woods or Jack Nicklaus or whoever has won that tournament, like, means something. So I don't think it does anything. I think it actually helps Bryson's YouTube channel. It helps Bryson's business. It does not help Liv's business. I saw today Bryson said he told Scott Van Pelt on Sunday night when he did a Sports Center hit. I got to do a YouTube video on Tuesday. I'm watching. That thing's going to get millions of views. I would imagine Tuesday's YouTube video, whenever he puts it out, will be his most viewed video to date. So I think it helps his brand, as it should, but I don't think Live does anything for it. Let's face it. Whenever they merge, cancel Live and just figure out a way to play 15 tournaments and 4 majors together. Live's irrelevant. It does not matter. And it never will. It has no chance to matter, ever. And this is just a consumer. And I love golf. And I'm not like bound to the PGA Tour. It's just more interesting. Why? Because there's history like, you won at Riv. Well, so did all these guys. Okay, let's see if I can find one more here. Got a lot of people replying to, some call it, well, it's definitely the best parlay I've ever hit in my entire life. I had $150 on Bryson to win, and I also included Fleetwood and Hideki to top 20. $150 paid $18,000, which is, that's like a NVIDIA return. Pretty incredible. Never probably doing that again. Not that I won't make bets like that again, but that's a once, it's a once every couple of years. I mean, I bet enough that it's not a once in a lifetime. That felt good. Not gonna lie, that felt pretty good. Weird thing when you gamble, a lot of people ask me, like, were you on the edge of your seat when Rory missed the putt? I have much more, like $150 means nothing to me. I always say this about hedging a bet. If you bet $10,000 and you're going to win $20,000 and you can hedge where you still make $5,000, and that's a lot of money to you, like hedge. But I never hedge on a big parlay. Like if you have a parlay and it's the Super Bowl and you're turning $100 into $30,000, like let it ride. You have nothing to lose beside the $100. I get a lot of anxiety, like any gambler, when I bet 4 figures on people to win, whether it be a football game, like when I took the Ravens or the Niners in the Super Bowl. Like that was a lot of anxiety because if I lost those games, as I did both of them in a 2-week span, I lost 10 grand. If Bryson had ended up losing in a playoff or whatever, it would have sucked. But I wasn't that like, it was cool once I hit it and the $18,000 was in my account and now it's in my Wells Fargo account. But I didn't get the same juice as when I have $3,000 or $5,000 on a game or on a golfer. Not even close, to be honest with you. And don't get me wrong, it's very cool to win the money. But a huge part of like my rush from gambling is the amount I put down. Like to me, parlays it's just kind of lucky. And I got lucky. I didn't get lucky with Bryson, really. I guess a little bit, but I think Bryson would have beat Rory. I got lucky Tommy Fleetwood, who was well out of the top 20 and came storming back. But I've lost a lot of bets, and I've won some bets of betting. Usually if I'm going to bet big, I bet like $3,000 to $5,000. I get a rush off that. My juices get going. Unlike anything in life. Make good money doing this podcast. Money it doesn't do anything for me. Because, like, of course, I'm running a business here. But like when I gamble, like no different than I'm in the casino playing blackjack or whatever, it gets the blood going. It's like one of the rare things in my life, competitive wise, that still gets me up and gets me going. But that parlay, I didn't really, I didn't have the same feels. I was more into the tournament. I was honestly kind of gutted when Rory missed the putt because I wanted a playoff. That being said, I'm very happy to win the $18,000, not going to lie. Okay, last thing. We've seen the recent rule changes in both college and the NFL have favored the offensive player, and we are seeing that the NFL teams with offensive head coaches have been increasingly more successful. McVay, Andy, Kyle. But why do you think in college, defensive head coaches continue to dominate? Nick, Kirby, and Jim. I mean, Jim's a former quarterback, but I hear what you're saying. Then he says Jim is a former quarterback, but he acts more like a defensive guy. I think I saw a quote one time. Jim's the only quarterback I know that wishes he was a linebacker. I think because college, and you use Nick and Kirby and even Jim, who's former quarterback who thinks he's a linebacker, recruiting and building your team matters so much. In football, you're only going to have access to so many sweet players. it is much more of my brain versus your brain. Me coaching up the guys on a daily basis. Me getting a seventh rounder to become a really good starter. In college, if I'm at Michigan, if I'm at Alabama, if I'm at Georgia, if I'm at LSU, if I'm at Texas, I'm not taking many seventh rounders. I'm not. I basically have, and I remember when I was at Fresno State, Pat Hill, it was the peak of USC. He said, listen, Pete's a great coach, but it's not that hard to build your team when you're getting, if it was the equivalent of the NFL, 20 first rounders every year in your recruiting class. And that's what all the big dogs are getting. So you're getting by far the best players. Now, where scheme does matter is when you're playing the other great teams in these playoff games, like Alabama versus Michigan, right? Or when LSU and Alabama play, or Ohio State, Michigan. But other than that, like, how many teams during the season does Ohio State have to out scheme? Michigan, now Oregon. Like, do they really lose that much sleep playing Minnesota and Iowa and Rutgers? And I'm not talking shit. That's part of college football. We're in the NFL, like the difference between playing Houston and Kansas City and playing the Saints. Like, if you screw up, if you have a bad game plan, like, you will lose. You will lose. Sometimes the shittiest teams in the NFL have 3 wins. Well, they got to beat somebody. I mean, a lot of times, like, they're beating a random playoff team throughout the year. That's pretty rare in college football. Like, Florida State ain't losing to Boston College. It's just probably not going to happen. So the advantage you have in recruiting and as a defensive guy, think about the guys you listed. One thing Saban is a great scheme guy, but like, why has Alabama's roster been so good? He's an elite recruiter. Like he's got a lot of panache, as the people would say. He's got a lot of je ne sais quoi. He can turn on the charm. And obviously they paid money. Kirby Smart has a lot of personality. Jim Harbaugh is a pretty cool figure to walk into your house. When I think about some of the great coaches in my life, like, they kind of just had some swag when they went into a room. Pete Carroll in his heyday, Bobby Bowden back in the day, Mac Brown in his heyday at Texas. I think Sark has some of that. I think there's just something to be said. Listen, James is clearly not, their offense is abysmal, but he's an elite recruiter at Penn State. So you get the best team. So like Penn State, their offense stinks, but their roster is so good that they're still going 10-3 every year. Potentially 11-2, I guess, if you lose Ohio State and Michigan. They beat everyone else. So you really just have to like be on your AA game coaching. Obviously, there are going to be some weeks when your team just kind of mails it in. So you got to like make sure you win that game. But you kind of got to be dialed every single week in the NFL. You simply do not in college. Now, I'm not saying Nick Saban or Kirby is not dialed, but their team isn't always. And they mail in some games. And it doesn't matter. So I think the big reason is just simply recruiting. The NFL is not about recruiting. You only have, some years you might have 3 or 4 draft picks and $20 million in cap space. So you got to figure out a way to get random, like, why were the Rams so good last year? Because they had all these dudes in the 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th round become impact players for their team. Like, when does Alabama ever rely on some random recruit? That never happens. The best of the cream of the crop. Their team is full of Aaron Donalds. Same with Georgia. Same with Ohio State. Same with Michigan these last couple of years. Now, you got to recruit the right guys, but they're not messing with any scrubs.